Today we are going to watch a video called Questions Even Smart Atheists Can't Answer. As a self-proclaimed super genius atheist, I think I can answer these questions, so let's watch this video and see what we can make of it.
So these are some of the questions that my smart, well-educated atheist friends always cannot answer for anything because they never thought about it. Now, let me ask you those same questions. Did you create yourself?
No.
And most people say, no, I didn't create myself. Then did your parents create you?
Sort of. I mean, they shared DNA that ultimately became me, so in a sense, the answer is yes.
Like they designed all your body parts and designed to make you a male or female?
Well, DNA did that. DNA did all of that. My parents were just the vehicle through which DNA did its magic.
And things like that, and they're like, no, they just bore you, right? And they just bore you, okay? Now, did their grandparents and parents all the way up to the first Adam and Eve per se, did they create you? Did they program and create you?
Well, yes, in a manner of speaking. I mean, we're talking about survival of the fittest over countless generations that ultimately led to me, something like 3 billion years of evolution.
And no, they didn't, right? Now, so what do you believe? They believe no God and they believe in evolution. So you believe in evolution. You believe you came from monkeys or something like that, or something.
We are apes, in fact. We are still apes. We didn't come from monkeys. We are related to monkeys. We are apes. But no, I don't believe in evolution. Evolution is a scientific fact. It is reality, whether you like that or not.
Other animals that evolved into some other, and these originally came from a small animal, like a microscopic germ or something, like very simple organisms, right?
Well, yes, that is how that works. It turns out, thanks to DNA, we have a pretty good picture of how all life on Earth currently relates to one another, and all goes back to the same source, which would have been a single-celled life form.
And this most people believe. And then where do these simple organisms that are more complex than any machinery in this world, where did they come from?
Well, I mean, a collection of amino acids, I would assume, something like that. I mean, we've found them clear across the universe. They're everywhere. Amino acids, you find them constantly. They're the building blocks of life, and they are everywhere. And, I mean, think about the other things we're made of. Carbon, water. Find those all throughout the cosmos. The building blocks for life are everywhere.
Ultimately, you have to go back to water and dirt, minerals. Okay, water and minerals. Somehow in this mixture, you have to believe that life just created itself out of here. And then you have to ask the question, wait a minute, where was the mind that...
Life did not create itself. It was a happy accident, you could say. It did not have a mind. It didn't have to have a mind. Accidents happen. I mean, think about all the things that lead to things that you would just never expect. It was a happy accident, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
thought of this? Accident might have to come somewhere. Is there a brain in water and atoms and molecules? There's no brain, there's no mind, there's nothing there.
So, I mean, well, viruses and bacteria don't have brains, but they still do what they do. Viruses are an odd case because, I mean, they're very odd forms of life. Bacteria, I guess, are a better example. Bacteria, they have all the hallmarks of life and they perform certain functions, but they don't have brains. So how do they do that, you might be asking? Well, we should probably ask a scientist because I am not one, but bacteria don't need brains to do what they do.
It's dead. There's no life in it. And you have to believe that somehow, by chance, by accident, that life just, was birthed at all. A first breeding living animal organism just somewhere, something living got created by itself.
Okay, I don't think it would have looked like that. That seems more advanced, but I mean, I don't see what's so unbelievable about this. It seems pretty logical to me.
To believe that. And this machinery, or this life, is much more complex than a computer. Okay? You cannot even mimic it. It's so small, and it's so, it has an intelligent design, and you have...
Okay, I'm going to need some citations here. I think our best computers and AI programs are a lot more complex than the first forms of life would have been. Um, Now, that's not to say that they are comparable to like our brains today, because our brains today have had 3 billion years of evolution to become what they are. Our modern computers have only been around, what, like 60, 70 years or something like that in the most modern form of it. I mean, I know there were like earlier machines technically that performed the same sorts of functions, but if you want to talk about like actual computing as we think of it today, we're talking about like the 1960s being the genesis of it. So that's very recent. We're talking like, 60, maybe 70 years since the genesis of computers in any proper sense. And we've had that amount of time to work on computers, and it's not surprising that they wouldn't be as complicated as like the human brain, which again is the product of 3 billion years of evolution. But if you give it enough time, computing is going to get a lot better really fast. Think about the progress we see in AI now. I saw a video today showing the first forms of like AI driven video. It was a video of, I think it was Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it was just trippy. It was like an LSD nightmare. But then we have new programs that are coming out now that do the same sort of video generation, but in 3 out of the 4 examples given, it was really hard to tell it apart from real life. And the fact that this progress happened so fast is astounding. And now, I was always really skeptical of the transhumanists, the people who believe that humanity will increase its computing power to the point where we reach some kind of technological singularity beyond which we can't predict what will happen. Mind uploading, advanced general intelligence that's as smart as us and then goes well past us into a super intelligence. I used to think that stuff was a pipe dream. You take me back 3, 4 years ago, I would have thought that's a pipe dream. But now it's like we may have Commander Data from, or is he Commander? Well, we might have Data from Star Trek in what, like, 20 years? Not the body, but like the mind. I don't think our artificial intelligence now is really all that different from the Data sort of character. And they thought that was so unlikely in the 80s and 90s that Data was considered anomalous in the, what, 2200s, 2300s even. So we're progressing a lot faster than a lot of people thought possible, myself included, just a few years ago. I've always had a great grasp for technological progress, but now, because AI is expanding so rapidly, it's hard to know what's going to happen next. And this argument about computers not being as advanced as life, it certainly has been true, but there's no guarantee it will continue being true as this stuff expands rapidly in the future. Now, I think we're still some years away from being as advanced as the human brain, but it almost certainly will happen and transcend even that. Now, he just mentioned intelligent design also, so I must note, intelligent design is not science. It is an assertion based on religion that is not based in any way in reality as far as scientists can tell.
To think, well, where did this design come from? Nobody can answer. I was like, oh, well, I don't know, right?
What do you mean nobody can answer? But also, let's assume nobody could answer, but there are answers for these things. I mean, read the Richard Dawkins book, The Greatest Show on Earth, The Evidence for Evolution, which charts the evolution of the eye, which seems an incredible evolutionary thing that happened. We do have answers. But even if we didn't, that wouldn't mean you could just throw your God in there willy-nilly. That's called the God of the gaps. It's a fallacy, and in history that has been wrong time and time again. Everywhere God is put as an explanation, eventually we find out God is not the explanation. So that is not a good argument to go with, my guy.
And you have to believe further on that there is this male and female, and trees that bear seeds and fruits, right? So you have to think, well, then this germ, one day have to decide, you know what, I'm gonna separate and create a new being, and this new being is gonna be female, and I'm gonna have sex with it to procreate new babies.
Whoa there, let's get off the perverted stuff, okay? no decisions were made. These things were not deciding these things. It turned out to be evolutionarily advantageous to have species breeding with male and female pairs. But there are more pairs than that in nature, and sometimes those roles are very oddly reversed. The seahorse, the male seahorse, for example, is the one that has the babies, the one that, produces the babies. It's very odd stuff. And nature is just not that simple. There are species that, reproduce asexually. Sometimes species you wouldn't even expect to do that. So we know that like life has evolved these features because they were convenient to the survival of species.
like with eggs or whatever. Okay? And you have to be able to divide your body and have the ability to create and design woman parts. Okay? And to create, even to change your own body to make sperm cells or seeds or whatever. And you have to perfectly create it to create new living creatures that are totally not you. You're not your father. Okay? Your father is not you. Your father is not even your grandpa. Each have an individual own mind, and it's different.
And we all come from DNA as a result of billions of years of evolution. We have never seen the hand of God reach down to implant a fetus. We have never seen the hand of God reach down to rearrange DNA. Those things, as far as we can tell, happen naturally.
Okay? You're totally don't care about, most people don't care much about their grandparents, whatever. It's not like you are that person. It's a totally new, different person. You agree? Yeah. So, and you have to believe that.
Isn't he kind of like proving himself wrong? Because if I am a new person, different than my parents, but I am the result of the DNA from my parents, doesn't that imply, at least on the smallest of possible scales, some example of evolution? Now, let's be clear. I'm not saying that I am greatly evolved from my parents. My genetic differences from them are not vast. But it obviously has happened. I am different than them in some way. And nobody arranged for that to happen. That's just the result of DNA. So, isn't he kind of defeating his own points here a little bit?
All these things came by itself. And that is totally a belief, it's a religion. Atheism is a religion.
Well, no, it's not. I don't have a belief system given to me by atheism. I was, in fact, an atheist before I even knew what evolution or the Big Bang were. I just heard this God stuff and thought, well, there's no way. That's just impossible. And despite my parents' best efforts to brainwash me into it, I just never bought it. And then I found out about evolution, and I was like, now that makes a lot of sense. That's not religion. That's science.
You need faith to believe in it. But believing in God is not crazy at all, because God created all by his designs. And God in the Bible, this is what I believe, created male and female and trees to bear fruits. And in the fruit, there was seed to generate a new life, to multiply and to procreate. Okay, this was the design.
So you're quoting a book that has no evidence, none whatsoever, that you have faith in. Why should I believe what your book says instead of what the other books say? Because there are a lot of books. I mean, everybody has a book. The Christians have a book. The Jews have a book. The Muslims have a book. The Hindus have books. Everybody's got books. How do you know your book is the book? Let's assume one of these books is correct. Why should I believe your book over their books?
Design of God. Okay, and then another question I'll ask, well, there are many different languages in the world, like they say like 10,000 or more languages, and even many are disappeared because they conquered each other, big countries and big countries. And even in China, like there's Shanghai City and Suzhou, it's very, very close, okay? It's about 2-hour distance. And that language is totally different. And I'm Korean, and next to Japan, and even Korea had like 3 different languages before, as far as the history goes. And China has many, many hundreds of different languages as history goes before, and many got deleted. You have to see.
Languages got deleted. Okay, that's anybody want to take a guess what this guy's career is? I would bet it's something like computers, engineering, something like that, which would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
Hey, if we came from one organism like evolution, right? Where all these different languages that are totally different come from?
Okay, so there's a field. There is a field called linguistics. Linguistics is the study of language. And we actually know a whole lot about language. There are some languages which are isolates that we can't really determine where they came from. The Basque language in Spain, I think that's how you say that, is one of those examples. It is a language isolate. Whatever it was related to is nowhere to be found anymore. We have theories on where it came from, but we just don't know. Other languages are a lot easier, though. For example, the Romance languages like French, Spanish, Portuguese, they came from the Roman Empire. They came from, Italian too. I should have mentioned that, obviously. They came from the Roman Empire. They are descendants of Latin. And we can chart the evolution of these languages from Latin because, they happened during recorded history. Some languages are harder to flesh out. I mean, some languages we still don't understand the scripts for. We still don't understand how they worked, where they came from. We don't get them. But we are working on it. We're on the case. And we know how languages work, where they come from. We have a pretty good history of languages. I mean, we got Proto-Indo-European languages that we've constructed languages based on the languages that exist now and their common features. And so we have a pretty good idea of where languages come from. There is a whole field called linguistics. I feel the need to point this out to our creationist friends. Just because you don't know something doesn't mean it's not out there. Again, linguistics is a whole field. I am not a linguist. I don't know almost anything about it. Probably should study some about it, but it's a whole field and it covers exactly these questions. The answers are there. You just haven't looked hard enough.
For example, English was spoken in America. It was originally came from England, and for hundreds of years, the language didn't change much at all, right? And I can understand these languages because, right, you're born in it, you learn it. You can understand even languages of English language spoken in England or in Australia. The words are same. The pronunciation, the words are very, very similar and understandable and same.
If you have ever read the King James Bible, you know how much language changes over time because, I mean, I don't think the King James Bible is super hard to understand in most senses, but because its language is very different than ours today, it can be a real slog to get through. And I do find that language to be very beautiful and evocative, and I like the King James Bible for what it is. It is very flawed as a translation, but it's very fascinating as like a basic study of how language changes over time. One can imagine you go back just some few hundred years more than that, the language is a whole lot different. Go back a few hundred years more than that, whole lot different still. Um, this shouldn't be mind blowing. I mean, it's how languages work. I don't know what he's arguing here, but let's hope he gets to it soon.
But cities that are so close to next to each other have a totally different languages, not only one or two, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different languages around the world. Can evolution explain this? Of course it cannot.
Well, why does evolution have to explain that in particular? I'm not sure what the relevance of evolution is to that. I would say that yes, evolution, some features of the evolution of man probably explain why we have so many different languages. But again, this is a problem of linguistics. I don't think this is really an evolutionary problem at all.
But Bible clearly says God divided the language so the people would spread all over the world because they didn't want to listen to God.
And that's what you call an assertion. As linguists have been studying languages for a very long time, surprisingly enough, they have found no evidence of that ever happening.
Spread over. They just wanted to create one city, and the Bible says it was one language at the time. But God confused their language because they were going against God, creating this Babel tower, to reach the heavens, right? God thought it was so foolish that God's like, I'm just gonna confuse.
You know what else there's no evidence for? This Tower of Babel. No evidence whatsoever it ever existed. No historical attestations, no archaeological finds, nothing. It did not exist. And again, there is no evidence for the idea that language came from Babel, and there's just none. It just doesn't exist because these are just assertions. What this is, these are origin stories of a people who were trying to explain how they got there and how they were so important, why they were so important, why God cared so much about them. They had these origin stories they made up to justify themselves and their existence. Pretty much every culture has that sort of thing. We know the Jewish one better than most because we have the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, that are very big. Billions of people follow these religions at this point. And that's why we know about these stories. But these kinds of stories are found in every part of the world, every culture, every society, and they're all different.
Your language and confuse all the language and change all the language of everybody. They couldn't understand each other, so they departed from one another. Okay, and that's what I believe, which is more scientific than evolution, because and the words are not matching at all. Like for example, in
How is that scientific? You have just made assertions which have no evidence from a book which has no evidence and is all assertions, and you're saying that's scientific. How is that scientific? Please elaborate.
hello is English, right? But in Korean it's 안녕하세요, and in Chinese it's ni hao. It's not even the same word for saying simple things like hello. It's not the same.
This guy's mind has been blown by language. And yeah, language is pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? But not in like this sort of way. This is very odd. This guy just like, you'd think if he were so interested in language, he would have studied linguistics. I mean, I am not that interested in language overall. I do have a very small interest in it. But I do know some things about linguistics. Not a lot, but some things. It's just something that's crossed my path. How do you be this interested in like the curiosities of language and not know about linguistics? It's very curious, isn't it?
Do you understand? Maybe there's some similar one like mama, 엄마, whatever thing like baby language, right? But besides that, all the rest of the language is totally different. Like thank you, konnichiwa, like totally different. You understand? It's not same at all. And even the same countries that live right next to each other, the people that live right next to each other, language is totally different. I can't understand a word.
Well, that's not always the case. I guess you could say that French is pretty different from Spanish, but Spanish and Portuguese are very similar. So that's just like, but having borders and having societies within these borders and having this border like enforced very strictly and having a world where not a lot of people travel across these borders, yeah, that's going to make these cultures develop very different. And as they do that, their language develops very different too. I don't see what's so mind-blowing about this, really. I mean, just think about dialects. Like, think about the United States. It's a big country, and you've got Southern American English, you've got Northeastern, you've got Midwestern, you've got Californian, which is its own little thing, and you've got Pacific Northwest, which is not really that distinct from Californian, but it is what it is. You got all these different dialects, and you can imagine that if you give it about 1,000 years, maybe Southern could evolve into something else. And now, at this point in time, Americans travel a whole lot more than anybody anywhere in history. To an extent, you might even say languages are, not languages, but dialects in America are kind of going away. I mean, you don't really get like strong regional dialects anymore because of how much we travel. But if you go to the South or the Midwest, those accents are very different than the Northeast or the West. And that's despite having, hundreds of years of continual travel between these regions freely. The borders between states haven't stopped us, but yet these regional differences in things like pronunciation remain. That's an interesting case study, isn't it? Because, again, you give it 1,000 years, and if these like dialects persist, they may evolve into their own languages. And I don't see what's so mind-blowing about that. That's just how it works.
Like I couldn't understand what they're saying. Anyway, these questions, when I ask my friends, their response is I don't know. And they're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. And I ask, like, do you want to come to church? And do you want to know about God? And they go like, most of them, they don't want to go to.
Well, yeah, because you don't have the answers. Just because I don't have the answers, or just because your atheist friends don't have the answers, doesn't mean you do have the answers. Not knowing something is perfectly fine. Maybe they haven't thought about it. Maybe it's something they want to research themselves. What's wrong with that? It's okay to not know things. I mean, I think like it's this guy, he should probably actually search out other answers than the Bible if he's so interested in these subjects, but he has not. These are things he doesn't know. And I think it's a lot worse to have an interest in these things and not know about them than to not have an interest and not know. I'm vaguely interested in these things, so I know some things about them. If you're interested in something, you should try to find out more about it. And you shouldn't just like stick to one explanation. I know all the Bible explanations for these things. I just think it's kind of silly.
To church and accept God. Because, you know what, believing in God, they think it's going to take away their freedom. Because when you believe in God, oh, now you got to read Bible, now you got to pray, now you got to...
It kind of does, though. I mean, think about like if you're a gay person and the Bible just says it's an abomination to be yourself. That is a pretty hard limit on your life. But this is devolving into that sort of, atheists are atheists because they want to sin thing, right? But no, atheists are atheists because we don't believe in your claims.
See, God, and nobody want to do that. They just like to live in their pleasure. They just want to do whatever they want to do and don't want to be interrupted by nobody. Not...
So what's wrong with that? That's another question I have to ask for like these kinds of people. What's wrong to just want to live your life? I've referred to this in several videos recently, and I'm going to again. I haven't read this recently, so it's probably surprising I'm referencing it so much, but it comes in really handy with stuff like this. Nietzsche, he had a concept called the negation of life. He believed that Christianity, negated the important things about being human, that it made you defer your humanity in favor of an eternal reward in the afterlife, which, since Nietzsche was an atheist, he didn't believe was coming, and neither do I. So people like this, they think you become a Christian, you shed these old things, these old sins, having fun, basically, and you get into heaven, and that's great. But for people like me, who are atheists, and maybe nihilists, or Nietzscheans, we see it very differently. We see it as the negation of life. We see it as the rejection of things that make us human. Or in another word from Nietzsche, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which in my opinion is kind of like a religious fable for atheists. You look up because you wish to be exalted. I look down because I am exalted. As a human, I have problems, as we all do. But I would rather have my problems and deal with them my way than give these problems up to some creator that I don't think exists. When people do that, it tends to have very bad results in my experience.
Not even their parents, they don't want to listen and submit to any authority unless they have to. Like they submit to government and stuff like that. But that's because they have to, or else they're gonna get kicked out or die or have some serious consequences. But I'm telling you, there is a serious consequences in rejecting God, because when you die, I mean, everybody's gonna die because you're made weak. You're not a strong person.
I disagree. We have a saying on this channel, okay? We have a saying that goes, survival of the fittest. And so, yes, I disagree with your analysis of my weakness. I'm very, like, super strong. But, this whole argument he's making is just silly, really. There's not a lot to say about this.
You're weak. If a car hits you, you're gonna die. If bullet hits you, you can die. If disease hits you, people die.
Actually, I guess there is one thing I can say about this, that, we submit to government because government is real. We don't submit to God because God is not real. That's what being an atheist is about. It's not like we're just like pretending God isn't real. We don't think God is real.
If you get old, you're gonna die, and you're weak, and there's this consequences where one day your spirit will leave the body. Your body, your soul, spirit, whatever, you leave the body. The body.
Prove that. That's an assertion. You're just making. You need proof. Prove that to me, and I'll buy it. I won't become a Christian, but I'll buy in. I'll be like, yes, I'm not an atheist anymore. God exists. Jesus is real. Won't convert, but you'll have me convinced at the very least.
Is dead, but your spirit is going to be subjected onto the Creator, and the Creator God in the Bible says, if you didn't serve Him, He's like, I don't know you. You cannot enter into this holy place because you're a sinner and a horrible person. You have sinned, you have lied, you have cheated. You didn't want God. You didn't serve me. I don't know you. Who are you? Get out. You go to where I send all the unbelievers of God into hell with the devil. And
well, that's a loving God, isn't it? But what makes me a horrible person? I do charity things. I love people. I help people when I can. I try to be a good person. I try to get better all the time. What makes me a horrible person exactly? Is it because I'm queer? Is it because I've had boyfriends here and there? Is it because I like to wear pretty dresses sometimes? Is it because I'm a liberal Democrat, think abortion is fine? What is it that makes me so horrible? Because even according to most Christians I know, I'm a pretty good person. And you really think that I should burn forever just because I didn't follow the rules set out by some divinity that doesn't even care enough to actually like make themselves known to me in any real way? or any way at all for that matter. Forget real ways, any way at all. That's just kind of silly, isn't it?
And the disobedient ones all in hell. And this is a huge risk for you to take, not believing in God. There's a big consequence. Because you didn't create yourself, and God said, well, I created you, and I created you for a purpose, to serve God, and to love God, and to love your...
Oh, that's miserable, isn't it? That's a terrible purpose. I mean, why would you create somebody for that purpose? Like, isn't that against like everything we feel as humans? Do we like to serve people? Do we serve our parents because they created us and raised us and were presumably good to us sometimes? I tell this story sometimes. When I was a kid, I saved my uncle's life, and I saved his life at great risk to my own. He was in a situation where his death was imminent. It was coming immediately. And it was a situation that by getting myself involved in it, my death was also imminent. But when it came down to it, the only thing I was thinking about is, I have to save him. I have to help my uncle. And so I did. And I don't expect him to worship me for that, because I did that at great risk to myself. He's still alive. He's been able to live, over 20 years after that point. He met his grandkids. He's gotten to spend, 15 years with his grandkids because of one thing I did all those years ago. Do I expect him to worship me for that? No, he doesn't owe me anything. Never has, never will. I will never ask him for anything. And if he needs anything, I will do anything for him. And that's how healthy relationships work.
Your brothers and sisters and your neighbor as yourself, but you didn't do anything for me. And when God says, what are you going to say? You're going to be speechless. You're going to have nothing to say. Well, I didn't know. What is that?
If that happened, I would say, you suck. You suck. You're wrong. I have been a good person, or at least tried my best. And your judgments are garbage.
Is that going to work? It's not going to work. So you see, there's this huge consequences. And you need God because you're weak. And one day you're going to die. And it could be any day. Any day. Do you understand? Well, if somebody, I don't know, any day you can die.
All of this self-loathing is just off the charts, man. These videos are really depressing because, like, a lot of these people just, like, they really hate themselves. Like, they really despise themselves. And, it's just self-loathing and self-loathing and self-loathing. It's sad. It's sad that people think of themselves as damaged sinners deserving hellfire. Like, no, I don't know this guy. He could be, for all I know, a terrible person. I don't know. I'm not going to assume that, but he could be. But let's assume he's a good person. Let's assume that he's a likable guy. Let's assume he cares about his community, family. Let's assume that he tries to do the best he can. But he thinks he's a horrible sinner who deserves to burn forever. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's a bad way to think of yourself.
You need to know God, and you need to get to know God now, before it's too late. So I hope this helps you in your understanding. And seek God, Jesus Christ, Father. I personally saw God. I'm a scientific person. I saw God, and I can tell you, I met God. He's been proving himself to me so much I cannot deny at all.
You saw God, like, with your eyes? You saw... what? Okay, so that just took a weird turn. I think you need to check into a mental hospital because they call that schizophrenia, my friend.
And I've seen heaven, and I saw angels, and a lot.
Holy hell. So that's a very weird turn, isn't it? Now I'm like concerned for this guy's mental well-being. I was concerned about like the self-loathing, but now I'm concerned that he's like experiencing psychosis and seeing angels and heaven and stuff. Wow.
And a lot of the people, when I tell them that, they think I'm crazy or something. I'm not crazy.
Away from the fact that the
I
defendant...
am not crazy! I am not crazy.
I just asked God daily for like 2-3 months, and then God answered my prayers because I sought him diligently. When you seek God diligently, put in the effort and work, God's gonna come.
Oh my. I don't know how I feel about that.
Okay, just like the Bible, how these people had to seek God and they found God. I did the same thing, and it's so true. This Bible cannot lie. And God said in the Bible in Genesis chapter 6 somewhere that He limited man's age to 120 years. Who can change that? Can you extend your life over 120? If God said I'm going to limit it, you can't.
I think science could. Like, I think in, a couple hundred years or so, humans could live a lot longer than that. Maybe even sooner than that if we can figure out some things like about how aging works. I mean, there's problems we have to figure out about aging, but I think lifespans could be greatly increased with science, especially in this AI era. Now, obviously, this what he's quoting here is nonsense, but yeah, humans do live at most around 120 years, but it's very unlikely. And there's like no consistency between it. It's not like Christians only live 120 years. People from all different races and religions live that long sometimes. Very rarely, very, very rarely around that age. And I'm not sure I would want to, though. Are you? Like, I don't think I would want to live that long personally.
We're creation. We're not the creator. So don't act like God. Humble yourself. Say like, man, I don't really know, man. I can die. Yeah.
Nothing is more humble than acting like you know the deepest secrets of the universe, including the very personal nature of the thing that created it. That is the definition of humble, is nothing's more humble than saying, God has showed me angels and heaven and himself.
You can die any moment. You should be worried. Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna go?
Hopefully not Detroit. Into the ground, I think. That's the most likely place, into the ground. I came from the void that I was in for 13 billion years, and I will go back to the void. It's not really a problem for me.
You're gonna really go into hellfire? Do you really want to go there? I don't believe that. Well, you're gonna find out then, because I found out that there is really hell. God's like, God, you said there's hell, man. Show me. And God literally showed me right on my face.
Okay, well, getting heavy with the delusion there. So that's obviously a lot. I hope this guy is okay. But this person, he's used some variation of Pascal's wager throughout this, just like implying there's two options. You can be an atheist or you can be a Christian. One of us has to be right. But no, there's a bunch of other options. What if we're both wrong and the Muslims are right? Pascal's wager doesn't really have a satisfying answer to this question.
So, I'm here to tell you as a witness, okay, of knowing Jesus Christ. And it's much blessed because He loves you. He loves that He gave His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to die for your sins so you can be cleansed and enter into the kingdom of heaven.
That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, that's all of this video. So that's something. There's a lot to say here, and that's why I've said a lot. This video is going to be way too long for what it is, but like, yeah, there's a lot to this one. Hey, he wanted answers. He said even smart atheists can't answer, and I think I gave really good answers. So hopefully this suffices, and if he ever sees this video, assuming he's not in a mental institute, hopefully he'll like these answers and not mind that I made fun of him a little bit for being obviously insane. But that's all I got for this one, and thanks for watching.